Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Accounting Insiders Podcast. My name is Gary DeHart. I'm the publisher of Insightful Accountant and the host of the Accounting Insiders Podcast. And my guest today, it is, what's today? May the 15th, 2025. And my guest is Randy Johnston. And Randy, I didn't get your title. I think you probably have multiple titles because you have your hands in multiple businesses. So I don't know which one you go by that our core audience would know, but appreciate you being here with
Well,
us.
well, Gary, pleased to join you and your listeners. And you are right, because I use co-founder with my NMGI business and executive vice president with my K2 business, and I'm CISO for RX Genomics, and I can keep going, but
Yeah,
that's probably more than enough.
right. So, all right. So the two that I'm aware of were the first two, the NMGI and then K2.
K2.
So just high level, what is NMGI?
Yeah. So Network Management Group Inc., NMGI, we founded or started that business December 7th of 1983
Okay.
and opened a retail location in May of 84. So the business is 42 plus years old at this point. Uh, we started out as a network infrastructure VAR, dealt heavily in banking, and I was actually going behind Gary Boomer, who was doing uh, consulting for banks, and I was actually making the networks work in those early
Okay.
days. And nowadays, that business has evolved into a managed service provider, and the team supports CPA firms from Boston to Honolulu 24 by 7. So we have both a managed service business and a small hosting operation that we really had to start because of performance of some of the hosting vendors in the marketplace.
Okay.
And that business, again, supports tens of thousands of CPAs. Now, on the other hand,
Mhm.
the K2 business that you know, and that's actually where I think our first relationships occurred. K2 produces continuing professional education in the US and PD, professional development in Canada, producing about 1,600 events a year to about 100,000 CPAs.
Okay.
So that business is 38 years old this year. And
Wow.
I've been a partner in that business for a long time too. So, it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Educate, support, consult, anything that is technology related to accounting, we tend to have a bit of a hand in. And so that could be for public practice, tax audit, client accounting services. It could be industry attendees, accounting software, business analytics, and so on.
Gotcha. The what is the on the training side, what's that looking like now, face to face versus online? How's that breaking down?
Yeah, that is very fascinating how it's evolved. Um, we actually increased our business during the pandemic. A lot more
Yeah.
of it, went virtual. And I think our analysis was that people wanted a quality experience. We had a good brand name. Uh,
Hmm.
the blend, though, is remaining, well, post pandemic recovery. The blood's blend is, I'll get it out. Blend is remaining about 50-50. And,
Okay.
and it's interesting to me to note that places that I would think would be face to face, let's just pick on Texas as an example, is virtual. And
Mm.
places that I would think would be virtual, Illinois, for example, is face to face.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is not what you would have expected if you just think about U.S. demographics. Now, the Canadians, they've tended to stay a little more virtual. And my suspicion is greater travel distances in
Mm.
Canada. The
Yeah.
virtual attendance lets more people attend that way. So it's about 50-50, and that's a fair question because I would have thought there'd have been a little bit more recovery.
Yeah.
I do understand people's desire for virtual content, but uniformly, um, CPA professionals and accounting professionals in general tell me that they don't get as much out of a virtual event as they do live because it's not the presenter. The content
Right.
needs to be good, but it's the interactions with all the other people, the
Yeah.
networking. That stuff is really hard to reproduce virtually. And I have not found a great way to do that yet.
Yeah.
I've got some techniques, but honestly, it's not like meeting you face to face in Atlanta or Orlando or
Sure.
wherever we bump into each other.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm 100% on what you're saying there because it's not the same. And I don't know that technology will ever make it the same. And so much of the profession is smaller firms, people, working at home in their basement, or in my case, in the spare guest room,
Mhm.
um, that we don't get, those opportunities to get together with people. And so there is just so much value in that face to face
There,
that,
there is, and from an instructor perspective, if I'm teaching CPE or PD, or if I'm consulting, because I was on site in a top 100 firm consulting last week, I just read the body language, and it's like I can tell when I'm instructing that people are confused, and
yeah,
I can retrench pretty quickly and say, well, how about this way? And I usually have two or three ways to explain almost anything. And if people are still confused, then I'll kind of work on it. But the fact of the matter is, virtually, even if I'm watching carefully all of the cameras or whatever, it's not quite the same because even with you and I talking right now, you can see I talk with my hands a lot, but
yeah,
I can't tell, with your hands if you're not thinking, yeah, that sucks, or
right,
I
right.
I can't
Look
I
at, give
can't,
me, give
yeah, give me the hook and pull me out of here. But it is interesting because again, just uh, it is partially tone of voice, but it's partially body language, and there's just something about that face to face that is not reproducible today
right.
virtually.
Yep, yep. Well, I told you I wouldn't take a lot of your time, and I had some kind of rapid fire things I want to throw at you,
Yes, sir.
especially because of the footprint that you have out in this space. So we're just going to hit some questions here. So as you're out and about, as you're dealing with clients, and you're dealing small firm, medium, large size, you're across the board, right?
Yeah, yeah. My
With who
call
you
before
deal
we
with.
started this was sole proprietor,
Okay,
and last week it was a top 100 firm.
right.
And I had the privilege of presenting to the G400 managing partners within the last 10 days, 2 weeks. So,
Okay,
yeah, I deal with all size firms. And another thing that's an oddity, businesses outside of accounting, so healthcare, banking, and so forth. So I do some of that as well because of the CPAs in industry, but
yeah.
also with a lot of what you would consider the EAs and bookkeepers. We
Hmm.
don't we don't really have a strong bookkeeping presence here in the United States, but in Canada, it's a real deal with the two bookkeeping organizations running and so forth. So I do deal with people who are running the equivalent of a client accounting services practice, but the way it's structured in a bookkeeping environment is quite different than if it's a client accounting services in a CPA firm.
Gotcha. So what are the challenges that you're seeing across those small, mid, large? Are they similar challenges, or small firms dealing with one thing, large firms dealing with another?
Yeah, Gary, that's an interesting question. It does vary size of firm year to year, but let's
Okay.
just give you some directional things right now because, where talent was such a fight for the last 7 or 8 years, that seems to be easing up.
Mm,
Okay. Number two, where there was such a rush to outsourcing, and there's still some outsourcing, the AI and automation is cutting some of that off. And I do believe if we look out 3, 4 years, the AI and automation will reduce the amount of need for outsourcing. So that's
okay.
kind of number two. Number three, the client service expectation. In other words, what our clients want from us, it's going up pretty radically.
Mm,
So, I started talking about client experience back in 2019, and I've been kind of a proponent of client service improvements for quite some years. Most firms of all sizes know they need a better client experience than what they're delivering, but they can't find one. And part of the reason for that, there's, to my count, 89 portals sold in the US market, 56 practice management systems, and there is no silver bullet where I could tell your listeners, just get this one and it'll all work,
right.
right?
Yep.
There is none of that out there. So, but this rising expectation of the clients and the management of the team has become more difficult, I'll say. It's not terribly hard, but it's different than it was a decade ago. The managers and managing partner, leading partners, picks, tax leads and so forth. They've got a little different animal that they're trying to deal with because they've got client expectations and team member expectations pulling them two different directions.
Mm,
Uh, there's a lot of desire around AI. a lot of FOMO, as I think I
Yeah.
presented to the managing partners. And I don't think firms are really missing out yet. It's still very early on a lot of the AI, but you've got your productivity AI with all the large language platforms, the ChatGPT and the Copilots and the Claudes and all those. But the AIs are arriving inside the products, Gary. So the problem is the practitioners are unable to process all the options. Because if we talk to AI alone, there's 10 plus AI products in tax and 10 plus in audit. And I thought there were 40 plus in client accounting services, but my current count on that is 73. And
Oh, wow.
I'm probably going to stop counting because there's so many. But the number of AI deliveries inside the product says if you just do your normal subscriptions and you're wisely picking, you're going to get AI assistance inside your products.
And good quality. I mean, are they, from your experience, are they comparable?
Yeah, it's quite interesting how the AI is kind of a rising tide lifting all boats.
Yeah.
So it is clear that everything is improving. Now, that doesn't mean everything's equivalent, because if we pick tax research as an example, with Thomson Reuters Checkpoint Edge Co-Counsel, and with CCH's Answer Connect, and with BlueJ, and with Tax GPT, and with CPA Pilot, just to name those five, the results vary widely. So, like the old car advertisements, your mileage may vary. Well,
Right.
for some people, the results from BlueJ, which is a 10-year-old company that started using AI a couple of 3 years ago, that product is doing beautifully at answering many situations, but it also has some deficiencies. And a sixth one I probably should have answered or named was the BNA, research, because the new AI that they put in their platform in March is just brilliantly done. It's
Mm.
such a big step forward. And so the problem here then is, how do you find one that fits your needs? Here, Gary, there is a difference between what a small firm, a medium firm, or a large firm might need because the complexity of the clients, their businesses and all that. So, small firms can get by with smaller platforms effectively, and large firms usually need the more sophistication in the larger platforms.
Okay. Yeah, and they have the people that can go and spend the time, and not that they want to spend time, but right, they can spend the time to really learn how to leverage the tool because it's a
Yeah,
tool, right?
it is a tool. And when you get somebody who's really brilliant, let's say a tax, they'll get inside the simpler tools and say, well, it made this error, it made that error. And that's sometimes too, well, it's like an old story, which I won't tell for this podcast, but it ends with too much product knowledge, which
Mm,
means you're basically paralyzed. And if you know too much, sometimes you can't make a decision.
yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and
we had an internal call today, and I was like, you know what? Instead of, because around those same lines, it's about using one of the too many softwares that we have, and like, you know what? Instead of trying to do 10 things, let's do one. Do one, do it right, really get the full benefit of the tool, whatever the tool is, and know that we know how to use it because, all these softwares come with, it's amazing what they can do if you
Mhm,
use them correctly. And we use HubSpot. We probably use 2% of HubSpot's true power and value.
mhm,
And but if we can just concentrate, narrow down, and go, all right, let's do this workflow and really follow it all the way through the process and see if we can sell something.
mhm.
So I think it does take time. But going back
And
to,
that I want to add to that if I
yeah,
could, because you're spot on. One of my other recommendations is less is more. Fewer tools used more
yeah,
thoroughly. People are spending way too much money on this tool, that gadget, if you will. Um, one of my favorite comments from a managing partner in Pennsylvania was, Randy, the reason you're engaged is, we had a problem, get a splinter in a finger, we'd put a Band-Aid on it, get a splinter in another finger, put another Band-Aid on it. And we're here with 8 splinters, and your job is
mm,
take off all the Band-Aids and take out the splinters and give us a pair of gloves, right?
yeah,
And so you here's the Randy rule. When you're using a new platform, I want you to get a 2 to 3 fold ROI. That's kind of first. And second, you've got to use 80 to 90% of a platform before you
mm,
give up. And a lot of people get 20 or 25% implemented and then they move on. No, you got to be persistent. So, Gary, just the same way you were describing HubSpot, just drilling further and further and further into a product, that can really help you. And we see way too many platforms that are chosen without enough due diligence.
Mm,
We'll call it an emotional purchase decision. Most accountants don't believe that they're emotional, but most of the buying decisions are made emotionally.
right.
So
Yeah,
you don't do enough due diligence. So do the right due diligence, use fewer tools, use them more complete.
I like it.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. I like it. I like that 80 to 90%. That's like I'm going to keep drilling that in on our side.
Yeah,
So you mentioned the people outsourcing expectations were kind of three of the big things,
yeah.
challenges, and but people seems to be solving itself. Outsourcing AI is probably going to help solve that. But client expectations, um, what are you seeing firms do to meet client expectations? Are they addressing it on the front end, saying, "Hey, you know what? This is what we do. You have our engagement letter. You know this is what we do. You know anything beyond that, extra fees or what have you." But how are they with rising client expectations? How are the firms responding?
And in some cases, not very well. All right. So that's not really a condemnation. It's just an observation
Yeah.
because too many of the firms are, Sally, same as last year. They're doing the same thing and just trying to reframe it a little bit. But the clients, they've moved their expectations so much. So sometimes it can be addressed with a service offering. And typically, when I think about the marketplace, there is a pretty broad shift to advisory talk, but very little shift to advisory delivery.
Mm,
So we're talking the game, but not delivering the game. And we still are operating so much in what I'd call compliance, whether it's tax or in client accounting services or not. Or we're doing the compliance work, but we're not really very advisory centric. We're still consultants. So we're
mm,
reactive instead of proactive. Now, here, if you can understand your client base and define service offerings and then be proactive on spotting client issues, setting up engagement to address those issues and so forth, and really develop the relationship. Because one of the concerns, Gary, I have for the profession, and this is whether it's bookkeeping and CAS practices or all the way up to full-blown CPA firms, um, that what is happening is the businesses are becoming too transactional
mm,
and they are losing the relational piece that has made the difference for all these years. So if you are truly doing proactive advisory work, you tend to be more relational to start with. And so what happens is you're in your conversations discovering additional client needs. Now, my belief is whoever's doing the client accounting services, the CAS work, and for that matter, the tax work, will see the opportunities first because you'll know that there's a cash flow problem or that there's too much overhead. If you look at what's happened in the last few weeks with the, layoffs in the big four and at Microsoft, knowing that we got too many people here. The number one reason a restaurant fails is overstaffing.
mm.
And the second most common reason a restaurant fails is excess product cost a lot of times by product walking out the back door. It's Memorial Day weekend. Let's go have a barbecue. Oh,
Right.
I'll pick up the meat from the back room here.
Right.
Right. Yeah. That type of thing. So knowing that with your clients is all the difference in the world in my mind. Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it increases opportunity too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, clients are saying, "Hey, I want this service." Well, that's great, and I can provide that service, but this is what you're paying me for.
Yeah.
I
And
would
you've
love to provide those services, but it's going to
that
cost you.
that's exactly what you got to do. And you've got to think about everything that you're doing inside your firm's kind of end to end. And I always start with business development to, engagement letter to gathering documents, PBC to into the work platforms, into a deliverable, into payment, kind of that whole end to end process. And if you think like that, you'll realize that there's many of your things that many services you offer that isn't quite that linear, but you have to have a process to take care of it.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you'll have to say, oh, wait a minute, this is outside scope. Here's what we need to do. And the most profitable of the firms right now are very carefully monitoring scope creep and saying, hey, I want to do that for you, but here's what we said we were going to do. Here's what you said you were going to do. You're not doing your part. Here's the extra fees to cover that. And that's true in audit. It's true in tax. It's true in CAS. I can keep naming practices,
Yeah.
but you've got to have a way to know that you've got this scope creep going on, and you've got to be able to have that conversation with the client.
Right. And be competent enough to have that conversation with the client. I think that's a big part of it, right? Is oh, they might leave.
Mm,
Nobody's going to leave. Nobody wants to change accountants. It's like it's a horrible process to change accountants. Most
yeah,
people, where am I even going to start if I want to change accountants? So
yeah,
I think you have to be in a really bad relationship for your client to want to leave you. And
absolutely. And you should be cognizant enough of what the issues are. And further, when you're having the conversation, you do want to have basis in fact. And, it doesn't take much to be able to define that. But so many of the firms really don't have engagements or projects where they're clearly tracking costs related to it. And again, we've heard the approaches through the years of flat rate billing and value billing and time and materials billing and so forth. But so much of the time capture and billing or costs are not associated with the projects in time to be able to do anything about it.
mm,
So, you know, if somebody's doing tax and they delivered a return before April 15th, but they don't bill it till June, you're not having much of a conversation about that one.
right, right. All right, let's bounce over to trends. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are the high level major trends? AI clearly is something
Mhm.
that we are going to be talking about for quite some time. Anything else that you're running across that might be a surprise?
Maybe not so much surprise, but the AI is clearly one. That client experience and team member, those are all big ones as we
Hmm.
see it. And I don't want to sound like the talent shortage problem is gone. It's certainly not,
Yeah.
because we're going to continue to have retirements out where people didn't leave during the pandemic. Now they're saying, okay, we're okay to go at this point. So talent shortages will remain. But I would say probably the next big thing is uh, so many firms have been taught to verticalize and niche. And the problem when you do that, and notice I don't disagree that isn't a good strategy, but the problem is when you do that, you now have to compete probably nationally, and you're going to be facing a lot of national competitors. So
Mm,
a trend that I'm seeing is a lot more acting local. So if you're doing client accounting services and tax, you can do it in a regional market very effectively, and you fly under the radar in many, many cases. Plus, you have the
mm,
relationships there. So, uh, you know, generalization is actually coming back,
okay.
whereas the verticalization is not as dominant as it was. Firms that are, I think, the most profitable are clearly becoming a little bit more generous, like accounting professionals of the past were. Number two, that even though there's been so much discussion about tax compliance going away, uh, much more tax work is being done, and
Mm,
is being done far more profitably. Likewise, client accounting services, much more is being done and more profitably. But a trend here that I'm very concerned about is organizations that are trying to commoditize client accounting services. It's a little hard to commoditize tax, but it's fairly easy to commoditize CAS if all you're doing is general ledger financial reports and maybe a few KPIs and that's it.
yeah.
That's pretty easy to get highly automated. So little concern in that area. Thinking about other big trends, um, we're seeing a lot more processing out at the edge. So we saw a lot of consolidation up into the cloud, but what has been happening, and it is happening with a vengeance, is costs are increasing radically on a lot of the SaaS and centralized platforms. Now, my theory and practice is that a lot of that is being driven by PE, not the public companies, but we're seeing price increases of a third or more. So
Mm.
operational costs are actually skyrocketing fairly quickly. And I think that's going to continue based on trends that I expect to see happen as this year unfolds and on into next year, knowing some of the forward-looking plans. And I'll picture this with a very simplistic infrastructure application, which is not used as often as it used to be, Citrix. Citrix licensing used to be $5 per user per month, or about $60 a year. And, Citrix was acquired by cloud.com. And the pricing is now $700 per user a year. Okay, $60 to $700 is a shocker, right?
Yes.
And other things like VMware doing the same thing. And here's the caution for your listeners: we suspect that the Microsoft Azures and the Amazon Web Services are just getting ready for major price increases too.
Really.
So
Mm.
now, if you consider you've got everything cloudified, you're running SaaS applications, you're running hosting, whatever, all those infrastructure costs are going to go up. And it's kind of like changing accountants. You're going to move, or you're just going to buckle down
Right.
and pay the price. And in the first quarter, I was appalled how many SaaS accounting vendors came back to their clients and said, your costs are going up and here's your new bill. I was involved with one where they were given 24 hours to decide or get their service turned off. I was
Wow.
not happy. And it wasn't a good deal either, because it was $125,000 increase per quarter,
Good grief.
and
That's
24 hours to decide. Hello, no.
wow. That's great customer service right there.
It is, but there's one other pretty large trend that I want the listeners to be thinking about, and I'm already seeing evidence of it. Um, the cybersecurity attacks are increasing in their precision and
Mm.
their rapidity. So when a fault, a 0-day, for example, is discovered, reported in CVEs, the bad actors are now able to produce an attack program the same day that the fault is announced.
Wow.
And in many of these cases, they're using agentic AI. Okay, now remember, agentic AI is different than large language model AI, because it's kind of self-deterministic, so it will act on its own. And the agentic AIs are attacking very, very rapidly. Um, I've continued to look at the new vulnerabilities that are out there and how they're evolving, and things that used to protect us, like multi-factor authentication and so most of that stuff is not working today.
Mm.
So we have uncovered multiple instances of attack vectors that the bad actors have found through AI and then leveraged through AI, and it's broad. So we have seen those attacks into its QuickBooks Online, for example. I mean, I know of a vulnerability right now which is not fixed, as an example, and it's like, oh my. But
Mm.
we're seeing it with lots of the different vendors, and it's hard for the vendors to respond because the attacks are so sophisticated and so fast. Gary, an old rule I had with software publishers is, if I found a bug, I'd report it to you and kind of follow up with you and made sure it got fixed in 30 or 60 days. And if you didn't get it fixed in 60 days, I follow the grandma rule: if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And so I wouldn't say anything for a little bit, but if you didn't get it fixed in 60 days, I'd start turning up the volume. And so most of the publishers knew I was fair, because I'm an old programmer, so I understand how hard it is to fix. But if you're not taking any action, people are going to start knowing that you're sitting on the sidelines, or you can't figure it out, or whatever. So I'm just warning, almost everyone. There's a new generation of attacks that are really radical, and it's hard to be as creative as the bad guys are.
Mm. So what do you do? I mean, what's the solution?
Oh, I don't know. Go out in the woods, disconnect.
Right. Landline, fax, go back to the fax machine, right?
Yeah, and that's actually the problem, is we're all so connected today, whether you're using Google Workspace or Zoho One or Microsoft 365, your productivity's all kind of cloud driven. Your
Yep.
accounting software is often all cloud driven. Um, you know, the problem is what do you do? And the answer is just try to be more aware and just be aware of the attacks. That's probably the it's that's pretty bad advice, but
Right.
it's the best I've got right now because you cannot put in more layers of security and protect yourself on these things. More, uh, endpoint detection and response (EDRs) or managed detection and response (MDRs). More sophisticated, doesn't get it fit. I mean, you're just kind of, well, as we say in Kansas, SOL. I hope that translates to your listeners
Right.
nationally.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
Yeah,
That's great. Wow. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. I feel
you're
so good
welcome.
about
I
feel so good about my future now. That's
I always try to be uplifting on
yeah,
these things. You know
yeah,
how it goes, but
yeah,
people who know me and you do well. Uh, I try to be realistic about what I see the issues,
yeah.
and this one is far more serious than is recognized right now, and I think it will get rapidly more of a problem as the year unfolds. Then one other little minor thing, just remember, Windows 10 and Office 2016 and 2019, they all die on the triple witching day of October 14th, 2025.
Mm,
So if you or your clients have anything that's Windows 10 or older versions of Office, got to get those suckers replaced because they will no longer have security patches unless you pay the premium for Windows 10. But fundamentally, you've just got to assume all that stuff has to get rolled out in the next, few months.
yeah,
And we are in the current midst of supply chain issues because of all of the tariff conversations. So there's quite a number of products that are in short supply. And, yeah, we're in the middle of this 90-day pause right now, but I can't predict the future. But what I will say is your computer and phone costs will go up because even
mm,
the residual tariffs as they stand are up. And we're going to have supply chain issues, I think, throughout the summer is about what I'd call that right now. So
okay.
if you need products and they're available right now, don't wait for the new stuff, which would be my normal approach.
Right.
If it's available, just take it out. Dell has their new lines shipping in June. No, don't wait on them. Take the old stuff. Same way with phones. On the iPhone, maybe wait for the new iPhone just because it's close. But if you need one, maybe you go ahead now. So,
Mm,
and usually let's buy products right after the new generation products are released because you get maximum life. But I'm still expecting hardware shortages in the near term.
okay. Well, that's important to know.
Yeah.
All right. So you said you can't predict the future, but that's really funny because that's my last question is what are your predictions for each of these segments? Like when we talk about kind of the bookkeeping professionals, tax professionals, audit, and if you can, when you answer that, if you can kind of answer it in small, medium, and large. So there's like three going this way, three coming down this way. So small firms and bookkeeping, tax, audit, maybe not many small in audit,
Yeah.
um, but what are your predictions? What do you think is going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months?
All right, so I'll take your Goldilocks approach and
Okay.
try
Yeah.
try to get those small, large, and just right
Yeah.
fittings. But let's keep them segmented. I'm going to start with tax first. Um, it is clear that the AI automation of 1040, 1120, 1120s, 1065, and so forth is all being automated with AI. I was actually on a call earlier today on this, but my prediction is that within 2 years, firms of all sizes will be able to use AI to do processing of returns. I think it'll happen
Mm,
that quick. Number two, for the small firms, if you're really focused around tax and CAS, pick a portal that serves you well in that space. And there are about a half a dozen products that can do that well. Sometimes you can do it with some of the practice management products out there, but generally, if you're going to do tax, you need to have a good um, engagement letter, engagement organizer, and PBC gathering tool to optimize that client experience on the low end. Now, in the medium firms, it's clear that for the short term, we're going to be using more outsourcing because we just can't find enough sophisticated preparers,
Mm-hmm.
and the returns are generally going to be a little more complex as we go up market. Your volume
Okay.
is going to be a little higher in the business returns typically, but I'm going to predict that medium firms will get a newfound opportunity in personal tax again because of the AI automations.
Okay.
So what will happen is volumes will actually go up in the medium firms because of automation, and they'll be able to afford to take less complex pieces. Now on the big firms, um, business returns, particularly complex ones, will get a lot more automation. So if you think about the AI that's been developed by businesses like Additive AI, they've got K1 automation working pretty bloody well. And when you look at the other competitors that have done robotic process automation like K1X, I think you're going to find that the AIs are going to help with the large scale uh, pieces. Further, the tax planning sophistication at the high end is going to become better. And by the way, in the mid market, there's probably a comment I can make in that as well. So that's kind of the three classes for tax.
Yep.
For audit, let's pick that one off. As you said, not very many small firms doing audit right now, but the major shift that's going on is the audit platform changes. We recommend you only make an audit platform change after your peer review year, and that generally the guidance is going to be paired with your audit platform. In other words, if you're a Thomson Reuters shop, you're going to have engagement manager with guided assurance. If you're a CCH shop, you'll consider access engagement along with knowledge coach. If you're a caseware shop, you'll use caseware cloud with the dynamic audit solution from cpa.com. You may consider new entrants like Inflow out of the UK. You may have specialty things like field guide concern, but the bottom line is pretty much all the people that are doing trial balance, prep comp and review, and audit are going to have platform changes over the next few years based on the
Mm.
peer review year. There
Okay.
are audit tools that can help with some of the automations. Some of the lease accounting pieces are going to become more sophisticated. I know the guys from Finagraph, having a long history with them, but where they were acquired by Lease Crunch, we're going to see some AI automation in those areas, I believe. And so, the lease processing will happen a little more sophisticated, and the work paper PBC support will become more sophisticated. So the primary gatherers of documentations, the Links, the Trulions, and so forth, will get more AI sophistication. I've
Yeah.
seen I've seen more development in AI on audit than I have AI in tax. That's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So next is CAS, but before we hit the CAS, just remember that because of the SARS-27 change, um, CAS, financial statement review, was moved out of assurance over into consulting. So a peer review is no longer required to do CAS, and a lot of the independence rules are changing right now. So for small firms in your CAS platforms, you're going to find that you can use the bigs, the QBOs, QuickBooks Onlines, the Zeros, the Aplos, those types of tools, and you'll have a few add-on wrappers to support what you do with those. You're going to wind up with workflow kind of end-to-end. And by the time you scale into the medium range, it is clear that you need a little more sophisticated platform. You may still stick with QBO and Zero, but you might add, more sophisticated new generation things like Basis AI or Digits AI accounting, um, or platforms like Soft Ledger or X Ledger or um, you know Accountant's World might fit in that category. Zoho Books is going to kind of cross both of those. But by the time you get up into a large firm, most likely in your CAS practice, you're going to drive most of that with Sage Intacct at the high end and QBO at the low end. And for all size firms, you're going to have to break your CAS teams up into pods. Right now, I'm teaching people, Gary, to break their CAS practices up into about 25 service offerings, and then I usually will have tools to support all of those service offerings.
Okay.
But you can't do it all. So you got to choose your lane and stay in it. So that depth part of our conversation we had earlier is fairly important. Now, the thing that will become different is as more CAS is automated more, there'll be more opportunity for advisory services out of the CAS practices. But there's not very many tools right now to support advisory wrapped around CAS. You know, For Impact data out of Dallas, Aider out of New Zealand, Sobi Analytics out of the UK, just to name three, are ones that have a pretty good wrapper to put around that.
Okay.
And so I believe all size firms will try to and should expand their advisory offering, but it's going to be a little hard because it's not cut and dried like the compliance work has been.
Yeah. So just, and as a small business guy, I mean, that's what I need, right? That's
Mm-hmm,
what we need is somebody on our shoulders who is in the back end, checking it out, looking at it, and giving us what we need, advice, saying, hey,
mm-hmm,
like you mentioned before, hey, did you realize that, you're holding inventory or your food costs literally going out the back door because it's Memorial Day and then the 4th of July after that. So
mm-hmm.
let's wrap up with how do people find you, or where will they find you or see you out on the road this year? And then make sure we get a plug in on your website, wherever it is that you want to point people.
Yeah, so I am a bit of here, there, and everywhere,
Yeah.
but the websites are a quick way to be in contact or locate us. So just as simple as they sound, NMGI is in Network Management Group Inc. NMGI.com, or K2 Enterprises is K2E.com, and my emails are published on both those sites. So that's
Okay.
pretty simple way. Now, in terms of places, I just go where I'm invited. So, if I get invited, I'll show up. But yes, I will be at the AICPA Engage conference, Scaling New Heights. I'll be at the CCH User Conference. So, if it's a major event, the probability is that I'll be there because I've been invited to many this year. But we will be in over half of the states when you ask about physical CPE versus
Yeah.
not. I mean, in the next few weeks I'll be in Texas and Alabama and Colonial Williamsburg, and I can just keep going because
Yeah.
week after week after week, that's kind of the way it looks. But those schedules are published on our websites, and then of course we've got all the on-demand classes there.
Yeah. And I would encourage people to hop out there, check out, and that's more on the K2 side. Is that right? Those
That's right.
classes?
More
Yeah.
more more on the K2 side. Yeah, NMGI doesn't really produce any classes. They do the support and consulting.
Yeah.
And K2, we have a team of instructors that write new content every year. This year was a little light. We only wrote about 30 new courses this year.
Okay. That's all. Yeah.
That's all. Last year was 72, just to give you perspective.
Oh,
So
well,
it
that,
this felt pretty bloody light this time around. But for example, I wrote a brand new client accounting services course based on ones that I'd written in the past. I felt
okay.
like I needed to do a new AI cut on it, and new AI courses and tech updates brand new as it always is, and CPA firms new as it always is. So, I basically will write courses and produce content on about anything people ask if I have the expertise. Otherwise,
Right.
I send them to somebody that knows more.
Yeah, that's great. So you are certainly a great resource as you've been in the space for a long time and have a massive network of people. So again, just would encourage people to go out to that K2, and it's the number 2e.com, and look at those resources. And Randy, as my experience, I don't know how long we've known each other now, but it's been a long time. And I'm just saying this. Randy's a very open person, is a very available, is really the word I'm looking for, person.
Yeah.
So reach out to him. Randy would, from my experience, would love to talk to you and love to help you any way that he possibly can. So look for him at events, look for him online, and then Randy, look us up at Scaling New Heights. I will not be in Vegas, but I will be in Orlando. So hopefully we'll see you there.
We will see you there in Orlando. And you are right. I get a lot of email every day, but I actually am the one processing it. So if you don't hear from me in 24 hours when you send me an email, ping me again, because that means I
Yeah.
didn't get it. I actually had one of those happen this morning out of Dallas, and very nice CPA. And I said, I'm sorry, I messed up. But
Yeah.
in any case, yeah, you reach out. We can either email trade or get on the phone.
Very good. All right, Randy, it's great catching up. I appreciate your time. We will see you in about a month, and safe travels.
Thank you, and all the best to you. And thanks for having me along for your listeners today.
Absolutely. Thanks. See you soon.
Good day.